Hey everybody. Okay, so today I'd like to talk about something that's really, incredibly useful for all relationships, whether that be with people or with work or situations, memories, emotions, whatever, and that is triggers. So I'm sure that you hear people talk all the time about their triggers or what triggers them, and the, 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 we often talk about triggers in terms of he triggers me, she triggers me, that thing triggers me, that thing that she says triggers me. I'm triggered when I see that television show or whatever. And we talk about these triggers as if they're all outside of ourselves. And what I'm going to be talking about is if we can just kind of switch how we see it and think about how there are no triggers outside of ourselves, but the triggers are actually all within ourselves. So, instead of saying he triggers me, we could say he really triggers something inside of me. So it's like we have all these little programs running inside of us. And if somebody triggers that program inside of us, and if it's like some kind of unpleasant experience for us, whether it's anger or jealousy or frustration or irritation or impatience, whatever it is, if we could recognize that it's useful that that's being triggered within us, then all of a sudden that trigger has the power to set us free. Because if we have these programs running inside of us and they're never triggered, they're never set off, then we don't know about them. And they're just kind of lying dormant there. And then maybe they'll get triggered at some point every so often, and it'll be like a huge shit show. So there's a huge value in looking at what triggers you, but more specifically, looking at the trigger. So what triggers you isn't nearly as important as the trigger, as what is being triggered inside of you. And the tendency is, so if you could think about us as kind of like a machine, or kind of like a computer program or whatever. And again, we have all these programs running inside of us. And somebody comes along and they're like, what does that button do right there? And they push that button right there, and it sets off this like horrible trigger inside of you. The normal reaction is to get really pissed off at the person that pressed that button, try and slap their hand away, push them away, yell at them, never come back again. Why do you keep doing this to me? And then we don't look at, there's a program that's running inside of you. And yelling at that person is maybe going to temporarily keep them away, but it's not going to do anything about the program that's running inside of you. So what if instead that we had that trigger set off and we're like, oh shit, that thing's going, that's still there. Okay, well, let me see if I can like go in there and try and deactivate this program. Because then if that same person or anybody else or anything else comes and presses that same button, you'll just be sitting there totally okay with it, and you'll probably actually love that person. So you won't have that many negative reaction towards that person. And this is so interesting because if we get really good at being curious about our triggers, then our first reference will always be to go inside and question, why is this making me angry? Why is this making me irritated? Why am I getting so nervous? And then we'll learn about it. Right? If you're curious, then you'll learn about it. And our natural reaction when we do get triggered is to think that we know why we're upset. And it's always because of that person, place, or thing that made us feel a certain way. It's always that person, or place that triggered that thing inside of us. And if we can actually use something like this, for example, say, I'm actually not upset for the reason that I think. I'm actually never upset for the reason that I think. Because I'm not upset because she or he said that thing. There's something else that I'm upset about. Something else completely. And while we're not supposed to really, say that statement and then try to figure it out, I'm not upset for the reason I think. Why am I upset? Let me analyze it. No, it's just I'm not upset for the reason I think. So let me just take out, everything that I wanted to do to that person in reaction to what they did to me, or what I think they did to me. Let me just kind of retract that and just, remember, there's something else here, something else. And then that just creates a space. It creates a little bit of a buffer so that we don't keep on making more and more real that it's that thing outside of me that I'm upset. It's, there's something that's going on inside of me. That's why I'm upset. And the cool thing about if it's inside of me, then I can work with it. But if it's something outside of me, I can work with it to a certain degree, but it's really unpredictable and almost completely out of my control. But what's inside of me is something that I can always work with. I can always notice how I'm thinking about something if I can remember that I have a choice about how I think about things. So our triggers are actually here to set us free. And if we can get super curious about these triggers that go off inside of us and just kind of like be with them, be interested in them, learn about them by first accepting them and then not reacting them, right, what goes on in here, acting it again out there, because that usually does not help unless it's done intentionally, and that's a whole other story. But yeah, so there's a course that's going to be starting on August 18th called Life is Relationship. And we're going to be looking at ourselves in all of our life relationships. And it'll be incredibly, incredibly powerful, these things that we'll go through and these things that we'll entertain and try to work into our lives, because it's always bringing it back to me. What's going on inside of me? How can I look at this differently? Is there a way to look at this differently? Just that question will open up a whole new world of possibilities. All right, everyone. See you next time.